By 2010, the SmackDown vs. Raw series had seen more than a handful of games, but like the series that came before it, it would come to an end and be replaced with a fresh new franchise, but not before one more game. And on October 26th, the same day WCW NWO Revenge was released 12 years earlier, WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2011 hit store shelves. And today we'll be taking a look at the Xbox 360 version. Upon booting this one up, you'll notice that the THQ training facility has been replaced with the practice arena, which functions quite the same, right down to the checklist of tasks. But this year, it all takes place in an empty arena with a SmackDown vs. Raw 2011 stage design, and it all looks really cool in my opinion. There are a total of 77 superstars this time around, which is quite impressive. The selection screen now features thumbnails for each wrestler, so you no longer have to search through a giant alphabetical list. Divas, created wrestlers, and downloaded superstars now feature their own submenus that are located at the bottom corners of the screen. 2011 would be the first time we see the likes of Alicia Fox, Sheamus, Tyson Kidd, Drew McIntyre, and Yoshitatsu. It would also be the last time we see Matt Hardy, Mike Knox, MVP, Shelton Benjamin, JTG, and Shad. Vance Archer and David Hart Smith would make their one and only appearance in the series here. There are a decent amount of alternate attires featured here, mostly civilian clothes and weird attires based on wacky characters that were featured in the Road to Wrestlemania mode. But if that isn't quite enough for you, there's always the beloved Superstar Threads, which lets you change the color of a wrestler's gear, giving the option for even more alternate attires. There were also some wrestlers and attires in the form of DLC, including the Nexus, Lex Luger, Classic Shawn Michaels, and the American Badass, just to name a few. Last year didn't feature any special arenas, but this year, along with Raw, SmackDown, ECW, and pay-per-view events, we see two unique stages in tribute to the troops and the Druid Arena, which is featured in the Road to WrestleMania mode and is probably the most bizarre arena to be featured in the series, complete with eerie background music and some intense mood lighting. There are also two DLC arenas for 2011, the first being NXT, which at the time was simply a reskin of all other weekly show sets, and the other being WCW Monday Nitro. Now this is the first time the Nitro Arena had been seen in a video game since WCW Mayhem, which was released over a decade before this one, and it's almost perfect, though there are a few inaccuracies. While Nitro did eventually get a Jumbotron, it was never this big and never located center stage, instead being pushed off to the side, and WCW featured steel barricades during this time. But one thing they did get right that even 2K17 missed are the ring ropes. While the WWE features traditional ropes, WCW's ropes were wrapped up steel cable, which doesn't feature the same texture as standard ropes, and they actually replicated that perfectly here. Entrances have remained pretty standard at this point for a few years, and that continues here. One addition that debuts in 2011 is if you have the new WWE Universe Mode enabled, you might see the occasional random run-in during an entrance. It's still a fun way to check out the game's arenas at an in-depth perspective, as well as help bring the whole WWE experience to your console. One thing you might notice is that last year's circular, semi-transparent momentum meters have been replaced. The new meters are a lot more prominent and, in my opinion, kind of distracting, but nevertheless it's a minor detail and eventually I forget about them. And speaking of momentum, it seems to fill up a lot quicker this time around, with the ability to earn a signature move in less than a minute in certain circumstances. But you can change this if you're into a more realistic match pace. While the controls are pretty similar, the grapple system does differ a bit versus 2010. Whereas games of the past let you decide whether or not you'd like to perform weak or strong move sets, here the game will decide for you depending on your opponent's damage and stamina. While it does help the pace feel a little more simulation, stopping players from instantly performing chokeslams and powerbombs, it does take a little freedom out of the player's hands. When it comes to signature moves and finishers, you can now perform these moves without worrying about if your opponent is in a groggy state, which leads to a little bit more unpredictability, especially when playing with friends. Other minor adjustments, like pressing B instead of down on the right analog stick to pin your opponent, might take a few matches to get used to. Last year, Havoc introduced a sample of their new physics engine to be used for interaction with the ring ropes. This year they expanded that engine, making interaction with objects like weapons appear more realistic. The result is more freedom with these weapons, making it possible for tables to be broken more randomly, ladders to be placed in more locations and even broken, and weapons like trash cans having the ability to become smashed if a wrestler lands on one. Of course, whenever a new game engine is implemented, there are usually a few bugs and glitches. One returning feature is the ability to throw weapons at an enemy, something that hasn't been included in the series since the first SmackDown vs. Raw. And I'm not quite sure when or where this happened, but somewhere along the lines, winning animations became very generic, resulting in some bizarre post-match festivities like babyfaces barking at the crowd. Other visual changes include a new running animation for Irish whips, which looks overly acted out and a little ridiculous. We still see last year's edition of the rotating camera angles, but it's a little more reserved this time around, only changing a few times per match. The game advertises matches like TLC, ladder, and table as new in the main menu, based on the new physics engine reviving them. And while I agree that it does add some new exciting elements of gameplay to them, it's unfair to label them as such. Matches like Inferno, Championship Scramble, and Extreme Rules are also much of the same. The Backstage Brawl features some new areas to explore, complete with a lot of interactive environments that keep the mode from getting boring. One big change here is the addition of music during this match type, which doesn't bother me, but it does feel a bit out of place. Technically, there aren't any new match types for 2011, but the closest thing to it is the revamped Hell in a Cell match, as this is where the most change has taken place. Games of the past featured a very tight space between the ring and cell walls, limiting the scope of battle that can take place between two wrestlers here. This year, they've expanded this area, leading to a lot more freedom around the ring. They've also included weapons under the ring, as well as steel steps located at the corner posts. The cell door was removed, which means the only way to escape is to slam your opponent through the wall. These additions make an already fantastic match type even better. The new Match Creator mode doesn't really introduce anything new or innovative, just a new consolidated area in which these options appear. There are 3 pages of ways to customize your match. Environment lets you select from options like whether or not you'd like entrances on, how fast a momentum meter will charge, and what kind of ring you'd like, including options like Cage, Hell in a Cell, or Inferno. Win conditions consist of options for Iron Man and First Blood, among others. The last page is for rules, stuff like whether you'd like rope break, ring out, and DQ in your match. Again, this isn't anything revolutionary, but was hyped quite a bit. WWE Universe makes its debut here and is kind of a replacement to the old career mode. Here the game creates its own weekly calendar consisting of shows like Raw and SmackDown along with pay-per-views. Matches are created based on feuds and rivalries, and title matches are earned by wrestlers who climb the ranks. You're not limited to playing as one superstar though. In fact, you can play as anybody you want. If you see a match that tickles your fancy, simply select one of the participants and hop on into it. You even have the option to simulate matches if you don't feel like participating. Even better yet, matches that you play outside of the mode will be written into it as long as Universe Mode is enabled at the bottom of the menu screens. You'll even see the occasional cutscene or surprise event like the run-ins that I mentioned earlier. And this mode is never ending, so even the most hardcore wrestling game fans will have something to keep them entertained for quite some time. The Road to Wrestlemania mode returns once again, and in my opinion is even better than ever. You can partake in a unique story for Rey Mysterio, John Cena, Christian, and Chris Jericho. There's also a story based on The Undertaker, but instead of playing as the Dead Man, you select from a list of wrestlers that are trying to conquer his WrestleMania undefeated streak. Here you can play as either Kofi Kingston, John Morrison, Dolph Ziggler, R-Truth, or a created wrestler. The amount of effort that went into these storylines are pretty impressive. I mean, if only we saw storylines this in-depth on TV, the product might be a little more interesting. There are plenty of cutscenes filled with swerves, unexpected alliances, and bizarre events. One big difference to the mode is the ability to freely roam the backstage area before an event. Here you can go into different areas while interacting with other wrestlers and WWE staff. You can even pick fights with wrestlers leading to backstage matches. After a match, you'll earn points, which can be earned to level up your wrestler. Sometimes when the game really wants you to hear something, like a conversation between two other superstars, you'll be locked into an area with an invisible boundary until the conversation ends. Still, there's a lot of freedom here, and the inclusion of the backstage area adds another dimension to the mode. The game's soundtrack doesn't feature any licensed music other than those that were created for the show intros or wrestlers' entrance themes, which is kind of odd for the time but doesn't really bother me either. Unlike other games in the series, the only announced team here consists of Jerry Lawler and Michael Cole, meaning these two will be calling the action no matter what arena you select. While the Create a Wrestler mode hasn't seen much in the way of additions, the attribute system has changed. You can now level up your wrestler from the gate instead of after a match like last year. There are some new restrictions based on weight classes. For example, a light heavyweight won't be able to have a durability rating beyond 80 based on the smaller stature of the wrestler. You can also use the paint tool that was added last year to create fan signs. Moving along to the Create a Finisher mode, last year we saw the inclusion of aerial moves. This year we see corner finishers debut in the mode. Here you can create some pretty unique moves with the option to defy the laws of physics if you'd like. I like the fact that they added something new to this Create mode every year since its debut instead of just throwing it to the side and ignoring it. And last but definitely not least, the ever so popular Create a Story mode returns with a few new additions. Along with some new cutscene animations to choose from, there are also options for branching paths depending on a certain condition. Championship belts can also now be incorporated into this mode, as well as less limitations with created wrestler appearances. Again, this mode more than satisfies. I'm happy that they decided to incorporate some new additions here. So how does the final game to hold the SmackDown vs. Raw name fare? Well, I feel like it was a good entry, adding more creation elements than ever before and trying so hard to give us a more realistic experience with the new Havoc system. While there aren't any new match types, it's hard to say that the game falls short in that category, as just about everything we could want is here, with the exception of Buried Alive and maybe a few other specialty matches. With almost 80 superstars to choose from, the roster is far from lacking for the time, and the inclusion of the WCW Monday Nitro Arena helped me recreate the promotion and kept me playing this one longer than I normally would have. Even coming back to this one now, I really enjoyed the Road to Wrestlemania mode, as the stories are really engaging. This one can be had for around $10 to $15 complete, so if you're a fan of the series and somehow don't yet own this one, go ahead and pick it up. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It's been quite the ride with these wrestling games. We started at my early teenage years with games like WCW NWO World Tour, and here we are already getting close to the end, so stay tuned and make sure to subscribe to see what's coming next. See you guys next time.